Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. Former President Donald Trump appears in federal court in Washington, D.C. on criminal charges of trying to overturn his loss in the 2020 presidential election and stay in office. He's arrested, processed, and arraigned, pleads not guilty, and released. U.S. House Oversight Committee's chair, James Comer, releases the transcript of the committee's closed-door interview with Devon Archer, a former business partner of Hunter Biden, about any involvement from Joe Biden when he was vice president. We'll talk with Washington Examiner reporter Sarah Bedford about what the transcript reveals, as up till now, Republicans and Democrats on the committee have been giving different assessments. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Russia must be confronted for its using the Black Sea and grain from Ukraine as blackmail, as he leads a United Nations Security Council meeting on global food instability and the war's impact on famine. And reports that the U.S. military may put armed personnel on commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz to keep Iran from seizing civilian ships. We'll get the Pentagon reaction. Outside the Elijah Barrett Prettyman Courthouse, a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., several dozen protesters, some in support of and some in opposition to former President Donald Trump, as he appears to face charges related to his actions following the 2020 election and leading up to the January 6th Capitol insurrection. CBS News reports that former President Trump appeared in the federal courtroom Thursday for his arraignment on 4 felony charges, accusing him of trying to overturn the 2020 election results, pleading not guilty in the latest case brought by special counsel Jack Smith. Donald Trump appeared before a magistrate judge in U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. to deny the charges, which are the most serious criminal allegations he's facing. When the arraignment got underway shortly after 4 p.m. Eastern, the former president stood to be sworn in, stating his name and age. The judge then formally read the charges and reminded him of his rights. He said he understood, and he entered his plea of not guilty. Again, this is from CBS News. It goes on, the judge agreed to release Donald Trump under the conditions that he not violate federal law and appear in court when required. He's also barred from discussing the facts of the case with any potential witnesses, except through attorneys. The arraignment lasted about a half hour. The next hearing is set for August 28th, but Donald Trump will not be required to attend. That reporting from CBS News. And after Donald Trump left that courthouse and headed back to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, he made a statement before getting on the plane.
This is a very sad day for America, and it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all of the broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much.
Do you want these trials to happen before the 2024 election?
Former President Donald Trump standing on the tarmac at Reagan National Airport before getting on a plane after appearing in the courtroom in Washington, D.C. to face the federal charges. 4 federal counts, including obstruction, conspiracy to defraud, conspiracy against citizens' rights, all of which carry prison sentences if he is convicted. Alina Habba is a spokesperson for Save America PAC, the president's re-election funding effort. And earlier, as he was in the courtroom, she spoke to reporters.
The fact that I am standing here for the 3rd time in 5 months is not a coincidence. This is the Biden political lawfare that we have seen time and time again. It is a deflection from everything that they have done. And if you don't believe me, look at the facts. On March 17th, Hunter accidentally admits that it was his laptop from hell. The next day, DA Alvin Bragg indicts President Trump. June 8th, an FBI document is released showing that the Ukrainians paid the Biden crime family millions and millions of dollars. The next day, the Mar-a-Lago raid and the Mar-a-Lago indictment. Last week, Hunter Biden's sweetheart plea deal fell through when the judge realized it had blanket immunity. The following day, a superseding indictment against Donald Trump. July 31st, Devon Archer goes to testify in front of the House. That was only after they failed to put him in jail prior to the fact. What happens the next day? The January 6th indictment that we're here for today. This is not a coincidence. This is election interference at its finest against the leading candidate right now for president, for either party. President Trump is under siege in a way that we have never seen before. President Trump and his legal team and everyone on his team will continue to fight, not for him, but for the American people. I'll take some questions.
Thank you. I know the president has called this a witch hunt. You just laid out several examples of that. Any other thoughts that the president has communicated to you in terms of why this is going on and then why he calls it a witch hunt?
I think a witch hunt is really the way that anybody should describe this, because it's not something we've seen in our time. This is not even political. This is beyond that. A witch hunt is when you relentlessly attack your opponent, when you relentlessly attack the thing that you are most afraid of. People are afraid of somebody that cannot be bought by Washington. People are afraid of somebody who is independently wealthy and who has given up his good life to fight for this country. And that frightens a lot of politicians who are career politicians, unfortunately, because he'll get back there, and I know he'll be fighting for every one of us so that this doesn't happen to us.
You say this case is about free speech, but the special counsel says Trump could have disagreed with the results and talked about it. No crime there. The difference is what he did to try and switch the votes.
So what is it that he did to try and switch the votes that you refer to? By bringing cases, by using the law in an appropriate manner, unlike what we're sitting here today seeing. This is not appropriate. What President Trump did is he said, go patriotically and peacefully and protest. That is an American right. That is why we are America and we are not a third world country. Although I will say that today, I don't feel very much like we are in America. Yes.
This case should go forward before or after the 2024 presidential election?
I think that every court needs to look at this as a whole, right? It's not about the January 6th case. It's about the fact that in the matter of a couple months, we have seen them try and tie up, and me as an attorney, I've never seen this, tie up one individual who's running a campaign, running for office for president, so that he is in court, in depositions, and distracted, so that he won't properly run for 2024. And frankly, it's not going to work.
Alina Habba is a general counsel and legal spokesperson for Save America PAC, which is supporting Donald Trump's bid in 2024 to regain the White House. And she spoke as Donald Trump was in the federal courthouse. Again, Donald Trump pled not guilty to the 4 federal counts against him related to the special counsel's investigation of the 2020 election. No cameras were allowed in the courtroom, but there were reporters there who could be taking notes. ABC News has a bit of it. Special Prosecutor Todd Wyndham approached the bench and requested a speedy trial. This case will benefit from normal order, including a speedy trial, he said. But the defense said it needs ample opportunity to review a massive amount of evidence to be entered by the government. Defense attorney John Laurel told the judge they need an understanding from the government about the magnitude of discovery, including electronic data and documents. The judge responded to Wyndham by saying the court would ensure a fair trial without elaborating. There'll be a fair process and a fair trial in this court, the judge said. I am certain of that. Still, Laurel continued to raise issues, saying of special counsel Jack Smith, they've had 3.5 years to investigate this matter, and also there's a number of agents and lawyers that are assisting the government in this proceeding. And all we would ask is the opportunity to fairly defend our client, but in order to do that, we're going to need a little time. The judge told Laurel to raise any concerns with the district judge overseeing the trial. That reporting from ABC News. Earlier in the day, a coalition of groups held a news conference on the National Mall titled Not Above the Law. One of them was Christina Harvey, executive director of the group Stand Up America.
This afternoon, Trump will be arraigned for the 3rd time. This time for his attempts to overturn the 2020 election to cling to power, even after he knew that he had lost. Trump and his MAGA cronies are trying repeatedly to lie about Trump's crimes. And many pundits are focused on the political theater of this moment, on who's up and who's down on any particular day. So it's important for us to take a moment to step back and think about what's fundamentally at stake with this indictment, what this indictment is actually about. It's about whether or not we as Americans, when we cast our ballot, can actually be confident that our vote will be counted, no matter what political party we belong to and no matter who we voted for. It's about whether or not a president and his allies can throw out the votes of voters they don't like in order to stay in power. It's about whether or not we are a democracy or an authoritarian regime where elections are just for show and the same people seem to stay in power no matter the will of the voters. The answer should be clear that we, the American people, choose our leaders, not the other way around. That we decide whether or not our leaders stay or go, because this is a democracy. And that's something that most of our elected leaders have seemed to understand until recently. Over the last week, we have seen many Republicans rush to defend Trump, including many Republican presidential candidates who have said that if they become president, they will interfere with the Department of Justice and in processes like these. Accountability for Trump and his co-conspirators is crucial if we want to stop the next Trump or Trump from undermining the will of voters again. Now that Trump has been indicted for his crimes against our democracy, finally, we must let the Department of Justice and the courts do their job without interference from anyone. We can't let anyone interfere, and we can't let Trump and his cronies rewrite history.
Christina Harvey is executive director of the group Stand Up America at a news conference today on the National Mall with leaders of other groups with a similar take on the latest indictment of Donald Trump. It was held a few hours before Donald Trump appeared in the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., and pleaded not guilty to the 4 charges against him in connection with allegations of trying to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. 6 other co-conspirators have been listed in the indictment but have not been officially named. The U.S. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, today released the transcript of a closed-door interview that his committee did with Devon Archer, former business partner of Hunter Biden. An article at The Hill reads, "In the days between the interview and the release of the transcript, House members have offered conflicting interpretations of the testimony, with Republicans arguing it proved that President Biden lied when he said he had never spoken to his son about foreign business dealings, and Democrats claiming the opposite and saying the testimony showed the president was not involved in his son's business dealings." Coming up in a minute, we'll speak with a reporter about what's in the transcript. First, Devon Archer was interviewed by former Fox News host Tucker Carlson for Carlson's podcast.
I've got a lot of kids. I'm very close to them, talk to them every day.
Yeah.
Never called them on speaker during a business meeting. That's weird. You've got a lot of kids. You're close to them. Do you call them on speaker during business meetings?
Do I call?
I mean, what is that? A grown man calling his dad on a speakerphone during a business meeting?
Right, and to be clear, sometimes it was the call was coming in and the speaker would go on. So it's just the president. You have to be, I mean, you understand DC, right? So the power to have that access and that conversation, and it's not in a scheduled conference call, and it's a part of your family, that's like the pinnacle of power in D.C.
100%. I guess I'm pivoting against the lie that I'm hearing people tell with a straight face, Congressman Goldman, for example, that we don't really know what was going on. Really? You're taking a call from the vice president and you put it on speaker. It's not just, hey, Dad, I'm in a meeting with some buddies.
Right.
It's, let me put my dad, the vice president, on speaker.
Yeah. Yep. In the rear view, it's an abuse of soft power, I'd say.
An abuse of soft power.
Devon Archer interviewed by Tucker Carlson for Tucker Carlson's podcast. Washington Examiner reporter Sarah Bedford writes that the House Oversight Committee released the Devon Archer transcript on Thursday amid competing summaries of Archer's answers put forward by both Republicans and Democrats. And she joins us now on the phone. Thanks for being with us. You've looked at the transcript. What does it say?
I think there was a little bit of disappointment for both sides in this transcript. Devon Archer is a very close associate of Hunter Biden's and didn't provide a real smoking gun that Republicans were looking for. But this was very far from an exoneration of Joe Biden. If you step back and think about how far we've come from I never discuss business deals with my son to participating in 20, at least, conference calls with business associates of Hunter Biden's, attending meetings in person with people he knew Hunter Biden to be working with on these foreign lobbying deals. And, I don't think that the conversations necessarily needed to be substantive to still be unethical at best and to still reveal Joe Biden's initial statements about all of this as misleading. So I do think that Democrats have a little bit of reason to be nervous about what Devon Archer said as well.
Was there anything brand new as part of the many hours that they spoke to him? Any new information come out?
Well, I think, there's been a lot of plausible deniability for President Biden and his absence from Hunter Biden's business deals. The fact that a credible witness is now on record saying that Joe Biden did participate in a number of these conversations with the business associates. He wasn't necessarily conducting business while he was on speakerphone with these business associates, right? He said most of the conversations were casual in nature. But the fact that now we do have evidence that Joe Biden knowingly spoke with these business partners. And, the White House continues to say that Hunter Biden was not in business with his father, but the Archer testimony sort of shows that Joe Biden sort of was the business of Hunter Biden. He was selling the ability to get the vice president on the phone at a moment's notice. And, at best, Joe Biden willfully participated in allowing him to create that perception.
At your article at WashingtonExaminer.com, it's titled 9 Takeaways from the Devon Archer transcript. The very first one is Biden attorneys intervened. What was that?
This was an interesting exchange that took place at the beginning of the interview. Matthew Schwartz is Devon Archer's attorney, and he stood up and sort of just said, I received a correspondence over the weekend, and this interview took place on Monday, so this was just a couple days before they came in. I received a correspondence from Mr. Biden's attorney sort of warning me about Mazars-type questions that we might be faced, and so, for that reason, I'm gonna pump the brakes on some lines of questioning that are outside of the scope. The Mazars type issues, I believe, is a reference to a Supreme Court case involving former President Donald Trump, in which Donald Trump, his legal team successfully convinced the Supreme Court that presidents should have more protection from congressional oversight than other federal agencies. So, this looks like an attempt potentially from a lawyer connected to the Biden family, an attempt to, shield some lines of questioning that might have gotten more at what Joe Biden's role in the business was. And so I don't think that House Republicans are going to be satisfied with this interview alone.
We're talking with Sarah Bedford from the Washington Examiner. And the last item on your 9 takeaways is Devon Archer received immunity.
Right. That was an interesting one that was buried pretty deep in the transcript. It actually came during the Democrats' questioning, which means it was more than 2 hours into the interview. But Archer's attorney explained that Mr. Archer had spoken with a grand jury in Delaware. Delaware is where the U.S. Attorney's Office is continuing to investigate Hunter Biden's business deals, and that he had done so under an immunity agreement. That was not previously known either, and, provides a little bit more context about why Devon Archer is willing to speak now when all of the events he's discussing are, sometimes close to 10 years ago, if not, further in the past. So the fact that he was recently granted immunity, it makes a little more sense why he's willing to be more forthcoming with congressional investigators and, as you've probably seen, also to speak publicly to the media.
And finally, what happens now? What happens next in the House Oversight Committee's investigation?
Well, the House House Oversight Committee is focused on the actual substance of the allegations against Hunter Biden, right? Whereas the House Judiciary Committee is looking into what the IRS whistleblowers said about alleged favorable treatment given to the Bidens. There are a number of other Hunter Biden business associates that House Republicans are working on getting in contact with. They want to talk to a man named Rob Walker, for example, who also worked on these Chinese and European business deals. They want to talk to Tony Bobulinski, who works with Hunter Biden on a Chinese business deal that went bad and has pretty publicly turned on the Biden. And, you know, the Hunter Biden emails that Republicans have had for years now provide a sort of roadmap to a lot of these associates that might be able to provide more information, but it's not clear how many of them are going to be willing to talk to House Oversight Committee if they don't have the kind of immunity agreement that Devon Archer does, and this is a criminal investigation still at the end of the day. I'm not sure how many of those witnesses are going to be willing to risk themselves without that protection.
Sarah Bedford is a Washington Examiner reporter. You can find her article at WashingtonExaminer.com and on Twitter or X, Sarah C. Bedford. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reporting that Vice President Kamala Harris on Thursday will make multiple stops in Wisconsin to tout Biden administration broadband efforts just weeks before Republican presidential candidates descend on Milwaukee for the first major event of the 2024 election cycle. The Wisconsin visit is the first for Vice President Harris in a campaign season that is once again expected to thrust the battleground state into the national spotlight. Milwaukee is ground zero for GOP efforts to topple Democratic incumbent President Joe Biden, with the city currently gearing up for the first nationally televised debate between leading candidates on August 23rd. Again, this is from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. It continues that the vice president will kick off her day alongside Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo and Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat of Wisconsin, at Sanmina Corporation's electronic manufacturing plant near Kenosha, where telecom company Nokia plans to manufacture new broadband network electronics products beginning in 2024. Here's the vice president.
So today I am proud to announce that Nokia, a company based in Finland, will expand this factory here in Kenosha and hire up to 200 new employees. Yes. They will build the parts that are needed to connect people with high-speed internet. And let me just tell you, so much of this project is due to the advocacy of Senator Baldwin. Truly, truly. These Made in America requirements were a priority for her. And for any of you who know her personally, when she's got a priority in mind, you will hear about it until you do something about it. And she was focused on creating jobs in communities like this one. And understand, all of this is part of a larger strategy. President Biden and I came into office with a plan to strengthen America's economy. We knew that for far too long, our economy has not worked for working people. Entire communities have been left out and left behind. Trickle-down economics, well, it benefited big corporations and the wealthiest Americans, but not regular folks. So when President Biden and I took office, we decided to invest in the working people of America, to create millions of jobs, to rebuild American manufacturing, to repair our roads and bridges, to expand clean energy production, to replace every lead pipe in our nation, to connect every home to high-speed internet, and to make sure that every person in America, no matter where they start, has access to opportunity and the tools that they need to thrive. All that is called Bidenomics.
Vice President Kamala Harris today at an electronics manufacturing plant in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin, near Kenosha. Republican Congressman Dan Bishop of North Carolina, writes Politico, announced that he is running for North Carolina Attorney General next year, abandoning his congressional district to seek statewide office in the Tar Heel state. The article continues, the decision sets off an incredibly competitive race for a role historically dominated by Democrats. Bishop, a member of the Freedom Caucus, has the kind of national profile and history of challenging the establishment that could flood the race with attention and cash. Congressman Bishop was on WBT, a radio station in Charlotte, North Carolina, today.
The last time a Republican was elected Attorney General in North Carolina was Zeb Walzer in 1896. Wow. So as the Republican Party has matured and we've had a genuine two-party system in North Carolina, this is one of the two Council of State offices that Republicans have never won. And one reason is, for example, that Josh Stein, the Democrats, they pursued legally related offices with great amount of resources. Josh Stein raised over $10 million in his last cycle in 2020, and his Republican opponent, raised about $500,000 in the general election. That won't do it. Not just that, but for many other reasons, it just seemed, after careful deliberation by Joe, my wife, and me, over the course of many months, we've decided this is the right thing for me to do, to come back to North Carolina. I practiced law for almost 30 years, and I was a serious lawyer, still am. I miss that as part of my life, and I think it's a particular time to reinforce support for prosecutors and frontline law enforcement officers. I think there's an opportunity to use the influence of that office to restore law and order to our cities, like Asheville in particular, Charlotte, and some others. We have lots of problems that are, frankly, everywhere, but is especially problematic in urban areas.
Congressman Dan Bishop, Republican from North Carolina, today on WBT Radio in Charlotte, confirming that he will formally announce on Friday that he's running for North Carolina Attorney General in 2024, giving up his U.S. House seat after 3 terms. The North Carolina Attorney General race is an open seat because the incumbent that he mentioned, Josh Stein, a Democrat, is running for governor. Wall Street today, the Dow down 66, NASDAQ down 13, S&P down 11. The Labor Department says the number of Americans claiming unemployment benefits last week was 227,000. That's up 6,000 from the week before. A Reuters article reads the overall labor market remains strong as employers hoard workers after struggling to find labor during the COVID-19 pandemic. While there have been high-profile layoffs in the technology and finance sectors, small business are still boosting headcount after being squeezed out by large enterprises, snapping up workers. That from Reuters. The July jobs report comes out Friday. Washington Today continues in a moment.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, brings you a recap of the day's most important events. Find out what happened on Capitol Hill, the White House, and with policymakers, all delivered straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at cspan.org/connect.
Welcome back to Washington Today, which you can get as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. Another story from Reuters. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken urged all countries at the United Nations on Thursday to tell Russia to stop using the Black Sea as blackmail after Moscow quit a deal that had allowed Ukraine to safely ship its grain to global markets. Secretary Blinken announced that nearly 90 countries had backed a short U.S. draft communique in which they commit to take action to end the use of food as a weapon of war and the starvation of civilians as a tactic of warfare. That reporting from Reuters. Here's Secretary Blinken at the UN Security Council meeting.
Since Russia pulled out of the arrangement on July 17th, ignoring the world's appeals, grain prices have risen by more than 8% around the world. Kenya's foreign ministry called Russia's move, and I quote, a stab in the back. The Kremlin claims that it tore up the deal because international sanctions were restricting its agricultural exports. In reality, sanctions explicitly exclude food and fertilizer. In fact, at the time it abandoned the initiative, Russia was exporting more grain at higher prices than ever before. And what has Russia's response been to the world's distress and outrage? Bombing Ukrainian granaries, mining port entrances, threatening to attack any vessel in the Black Sea, no matter its flag, no matter its cargo. These actions are consistent with Russia's decision last month to block the reauthorization of critical cross-border humanitarian assistance to Syria, a country where, after February's devastating earthquake, 12 million people don't have enough to eat. The United States is prepared to renew efforts to mandate this vital lifeline if the United Nations and Syria cannot find a way forward. We also very much appreciate Turkey and others working to reinstate the grain deal. Every member of this Council, every member of the United Nations should tell Moscow, enough. Enough using the Black Sea as blackmail. Enough treating the world's most vulnerable people as leverage. Enough of this unjustified, unconscionable war.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at today's United Nations Security Council meeting in New York City on global food insecurity, especially that which is caused by war, not only the war in Ukraine. The Russian Deputy Ambassador to the UN, Dmitry Polyansky, defended Russia's decision to withdraw from the Black Sea Grain Initiative and blamed the United States and other Western countries for supporting global food policies that he says are designed to keep prices high and benefit the very largest transnational food corporations.
Colleagues, 1 year ago, in response to the appeals of the UN, we put aside our doubts and agreed to a grain deal. But here, too, Western countries have managed to turn everything in their favor. One of the two parts of the deal, the Black Sea Initiative, quickly turned from a humanitarian one into a commercial one. As a result, only 3% of the exported grain went to countries in need, while the lion's share ended up in Western countries. Is this what we agreed to? The duplicity of our former Western partners was even more clear in their arrogant unwillingness to fulfill the second part of the deal, the Russia-UN memorandum on the supply of Russian food and fertilizers to world markets. And this is despite the fact that Russia's share of the global wheat market is 20%, while Ukraine's is less than 5%. This means that Russia makes a significant contribution to global food security and is a solid, responsible international supplier of agricultural products, not to mention the exceptional role played by Russian fertilizers in global food security. It would seem that given these obvious facts, Western countries need to focus on ensuring that Russian grain and fertilizers can get to countries in need without hindrance. Yet, this is not part of our Western colleagues' plans. This was unambiguously confirmed by you the day before yesterday, Madam President. So how can we talk about any kind of desire on your country's part to address international food security issues? All that drives you is the desire to punish Russia and your pipe dreams of dealing it a strategic defeat. You do not care the slightest bit about the interests of the countries of the global South, but we do. Therefore, I repeat once again that if all the problems that have been publicly raised by us, including in this chamber, regarding the implementation of the Russia-UN memorandum are eliminated, we will be ready to once again take part in the Black Sea Initiative.
The Russian Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations, Dmitry Polyansky, he also spoke about the resolution before the UN Security Council, and in doing so, said that Russia has a right to attack Ukraine's grain exporting infrastructure in the Black Sea port cities.
We note the work carried out by our American colleagues in advance of today's meeting to agree on a statement by the President of the Security Council on Hunger and Conflicts. Despite the fact that this document did not end up incorporating all the provisions we proposed, we considered it possible to support it in the spirit of compromise. The consequences of illegitimate unilateral restrictive measures and sanctions that have a direct negative impact on food security in the world have been left out of the document. It would have also been appropriate to recall paragraph 3 of Article 54 of the additional protocol to the Geneva Conventions of 1949, according to which the prohibitions on attacking or destroying agricultural infrastructure do not apply if such infrastructure infrastructures used as sustenance for the members of the armed forces or in direct support of military action.
Dmitry Polyansky, Russia's deputy ambassador to the United Nations at today's UN Security Council meeting on global food insecurity. Some Associated Press articles about the war in Ukraine. Russian shelling on Thursday damaged a landmark church in the city of Kherson that once held the remains of the renowned 18th century commander who exerted Russian control through the southeast parts of modern Ukraine and annexed the Crimean Peninsula. The Kherson church, dating from 1781, is one of the city's most notable buildings. It was once the burial spot for Prince Gregory Potemkin, a favorite of Russian Empress Catherine the Great. And also, a Russian court on Thursday imposed fines on Apple and the host of Wikipedia for failing to remove material deemed to be false information about Russia's military actions in Ukraine. Story from military.com. Marines guarding the U.S. Embassy in Niger will remain in place despite a partial evacuation of non-essential embassy personnel as the country remains gripped by a coup, the State Department said Thursday. Pentagon said there has been no change in military posture in the West African country, which was thrown into political turmoil last week, and that the State Department had not requested any assistance with the evacuation. That from military.com. John Kirby is a spokesperson for the White House National Security Council. He briefed reporters today.
Yesterday, I think, as you saw, given the ongoing developments in Niger and with the limited commercial flight options, out of an abundance of caution, we made the decision to temporarily reduce our personnel at the embassy in Niamey. I want to reiterate, this is out of an abundance of caution. It was the prudent thing to do. We still have not seen any direct threats targeting U.S. citizens, but nevertheless, we continue to advise U.S. citizens not to travel to Niger at this time. And our embassy, while it remains open only for limited emergency assistance to U.S. citizens. Now, at the same time, we've been tireless in our diplomatic engagements at the highest levels to help the people of Niger preserve their hard-earned democracy. As the president said in his statement this morning, Niger is facing a grave challenge to its democracy, and at this critical moment, the United States stands and will continue to stand with the people of Niger. I want to reiterate our support for democratic values, for constitutional order, for the rule of law, and for human rights, including the right of peaceful assembly. And we continue to call for the safe release of President Bazoum and his family. And we've also been steadfast in supporting the efforts of ECOWAS, the African Union, and other governments in the region to help mediate this crisis. The steps of a few are not just subverting Nigerian democracy, they are also undercutting Nigerian security, creating a potential vacuum that terrorist groups may very well try to exploit. And while we are giving diplomacy a chance, and we still are giving it a chance, we're going to continue to review all our options around our cooperation with the Nigerian government, given these events.
John Kirby is Strategic Communications Coordinator for the National Security Council in a virtual audio-only news conference today. Associated Press is citing 5 American officials, unnamed, telling them that the U.S. military is considering putting armed personnel on commercial ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz in what would be an unheard-of action aimed at stopping Iran from seizing and harassing civilian vessels. The AP story goes on. Since 2019, Iran has seized a series of ships in the strait, the narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf, as part of its effort to pressure the West over negotiations regarding its collapsed nuclear deal with world powers. The Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder was questioned about this, said he couldn't confirm it, and then there was this follow-up question.
Let's go to Missy Ryan, Washington Post.
Hi, sorry, just trying to unmute. Thanks, Pat. I just wanted to follow up related to the AP report about the Strait of Hormuz. I know you can't confirm that, but just to provide a little bit of information on the existing operations related to trying to deter Iranian maritime aggression in that area. Can you talk about the department's current approach for that, and also give us any more detail about the Bataan Group's activities, what exactly they are going to be doing once they all arrive in theater, just so we have an understanding of what the current status is. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Missy. So we'll come back to you, with some more specifics in terms of once they arrive in theater. But broadly speaking, as we've talked about before, by increasing the presence, by working with our partners in the region, and stepping up the tempo and pace of our patrols writ large around the region. The intent, again, is to be closer, to be able to respond quicker to any potential provocations and to deter any type of Iranian aggression. And so we will continue to be focused on that. But as I just highlighted to the previous question, it's important to see it through the lens of we're not doing this by ourselves. We're doing this as part of a coalition in the region to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz remains open, that there's freedom of navigation, and that we're deterring any type of malign activity.
Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder, an Air Force Brigadier General at a Pentagon news conference, referred to the Bataan Group back to the Associated Press article, which first reported, citing unnamed American officials, that the U.S. is considering putting armed personnel on the commercial ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. AP writes it comes as thousands of Marines and sailors on both the amphibious assault ship USS Bataan and the USS Carter Hall, a landing ship, are on their way to the Persian Gulf. Those Marines and sailors could provide the backbone for any armed guard mission in the Strait, through which 20% of the world's crude oil passes. The Pentagon held a retirement ceremony today for Army Chief of Staff General James McConville. It's a position that is likely to remain vacant for some time, as U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican from Alabama, has put a hold on the quick approval of a few hundred military nominations and promotions. He is protesting the Defense Department's policy of paying women in states that restrict abortion, paying their expenses to travel to states which allow abortion more readily. General Randy George, the current Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, has been nominated by President Biden to be the new Chief of Staff and has had a Senate Armed Services hearing. The Marine Corps is now being led by an acting commandant. In the next 2 months, the Chief of Naval Operations and the Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff will be retiring, adding those posts as well to the list of having temporary leaders. The Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff currently, the one who will be retiring, General Mark Milley, spoke today at the retirement ceremony.
Jim always operated not only with tactical skill, but moral courage every day under the most difficult of conditions. Jim McConville has been tested in the crucible of combat, but no matter the challenge, he always maintained his integrity and never lost sight of his internal North Star. He fought not for today, but for tomorrow, so that we would protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America for our children and our children's children. Every single one of us temporarily occupy a moment of time, and Jim is no different. Soon, someone else will step forward to continue to lead our Army. But this experiment in liberty we call the United States is worth fighting for, not merely for today, but for all time. And Jim, you have fought for this country with courage and honor, and you've led our Army with distinction. So on behalf of the Joint Force, on behalf of a grateful nation, to you and Maria and Michael and Jessica and Ryan, thank you. To your father, Joe, to your mother, Barbara, your brothers and sisters, all of us here today are here to honor you and to simply say thank you. We thank you and your entire family. We thank you for a life of selfless service to the greatest nation on earth. And may God bless you and your family in retirement, and may God bless America.
General Mark Milley, Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, at the retirement ceremony for the Army Chief of Staff, General James McConville. Senator Tommy Tuberville recently sent out a report called "A Document Separates Myth from Facts" and said that he is well within his rights as a senator to place holds on the military nominations and promotions, and doing so does not affect readiness, unlike the Pentagon's woke policies, he writes. President Biden, in a recent speech, said Senator Tuberville's holds have created a growing cascade of damage and disruption to national security. Thanks for listening to Washington Today, which you can get as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. And for stories making headlines in Washington, emailed to you every day, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, word for word, at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.